Dark Souls 3 is an absolute masterpiece, easily my favorite game ever made. There's a ton of content out there on these games, especially videos ranking the bosses, and by now pretty much all you can say about this game has been said. But hey, why not run through it again? I loved the game so much that I couldn't wait to talk about it, so I decided to make a boss ranking of my own. I've only beaten the game 3 times as of recording this, and I thought it might make the video a bit more interesting if I based the ranking off of my early thoughts on the bosses. This isn't going to be an in-depth analysis of lore or mechanics. I'm just going to talk about my experiences with the bosses, how much fun I had with them or not. This is purely subjective and really just for fun. I may come back and make an updated ranking later on, but for now, let's dive in. Number 24, the Deacons of the Deep. At the very bottom are the Deacons of the Deep. I don't think this is a bad boss. In fact, I don't think any of them are really bad. But in terms of memorability and overall mechanics, this fight just doesn't quite do it for me. It can be kind of a mess at times, as it's a mob of enemies, and they can throw a bunch of shit at you at the same time, which was annoying on my first run. I've gotten stuck in the middle of the crowd multiple times, and it can be a pain to break it up, but I realized later that you can use alluring skulls to draw them away and clear up the crowd. It honestly just feels like an obstacle that's not even worth paying attention to, but it's a mandatory boss that drops the small doll, which is required to enter Irithyll. They also occur as normal enemies throughout the Cathedral of the Deep and in parts of Irithyll, which makes them feel less unique and even less memorable. Because of how easy they are, it didn't feel like a huge accomplishment to have beaten them, and that's a big reason why I've ranked them at the bottom. Even though they give you a necessary item, it doesn't feel like they were worthy protectors of it. I do like this boss, but not nearly enough to put it above any of the others. So remember how I said there weren't any bad bosses in the game? Well, if I had to choose one to be the worst, it would probably be the Ancient Wyvern. I had fun with this boss on my first run, but that doesn't mean it wasn't annoying at times. And on my second run, I experienced some bullshit that I'll leave up to you to judge. Now, if that wasn't enough, here's what happened next. You could chalk this up to a skill issue on my part, but when it comes to the fire hitting me through the floor and knocking me off the platform, there was nothing I could do about it. One of the reasons I've ranked this boss so low is because it's a gimmick boss with kind of a shitty gimmick. It's barely even a fight. It has so much health that it's not even worth fighting without utilizing the gimmick, which is literally just running through the arena full of enemies to then plunge down on its head and one-shot it. The only reason it's above the Deacons is because it was definitely more memorable, and it was quite satisfying to get that killing blow. Overall, it's a cool boss, but it pales in comparison to the rest. Number 22 is Half-Light, Spear of the Church. I originally ranked this boss much higher, but after my second run and some thinking, I had a change of heart. I do like this boss, but I think I gave it too much credit on my first run. It's not that good. I will give him some credit because he's got a sick blade with some crazy weapon arts, but that doesn't make up for the annoying parts. First off, there's a giant who says some shit before the fight starts, and first time through this is pretty cool, but then you learn that it's unskippable dialogue, and you have to listen to the whole thing every time you enter the fight. I timed it, and it took 35 seconds to get through. If you get stuck on this boss, it's going to take so long to beat it. Not because it's a really hard fight, but because if you die at all, you have to listen to Argo's long-ass speech every time. To make matters worse, he can also attack you while giving the monologue if you get too close, which just feels so unnecessary, but he's really slow, so it's not that bad. But still, just why? I think I know why you can't skip the dialogue, and it's because the boss can be a player. If you're online, then the game will find a player to invade you, and they are the boss. I'm guessing the speech is unskippable to allow the game time to find a player. This is a cool idea, but if you're offline or the game can't find a player, then you just end up fighting Half-Light. Because of this mechanic, the fight can often end up being unbalanced or unpredictable, as you might be paired with a player who's less experienced, which could make the fight easier, or you could get a player who is insane and can perfectly dodge every attack. This unpredictability definitely lowers my ranking. Overall, I don't hate this boss, but based on my experiences, I can't justify putting him higher. And quite frankly, I wouldn't even say it's a very memorable experience, at least for me, it wasn't. It's not like, oh yeah, I can't wait to go fight Half-Light. Yeah, he's another boss who feels like an obstacle. Number 21 is High Lord Walnir. This boss gets points for memorability, but comes up short in gameplay. High Lord Walnir is just a very basic gimmick boss that can be easily taken out first try if you know what you're doing. The gimmick is quite simple. He's got 3 bracelets, you break all 3, he's dead, it's over. He has this one Death Fog attack that almost always instantly kills you if you don't get out of the way in time. And to make things worse, he's also surrounded by this fog, so you can't get too close to him or else it's over. His arena is just a dark tunnel that eventually leads to a dead end, and throughout the fight, he makes his way further up the tunnel, so you only have so much time to beat him, or else you'll be caught in the Death Fog. He can also summon skeletons to aid in the fight, which feels fairly unnecessary, but I ignore them most of the time and it's usually not a problem. I had fun with this boss, but it's not the most memorable, and because of how quick it is, I just don't see it getting a much higher ranking. Visually, it's really cool, and I definitely plan on talking about the boss designs and aesthetics in more detail, but that's for another video. Number 20 is the Curse-Rotted Greatwood. This may come as a surprise to some people, as it's often ranked much lower. I'm still ranking it very low, but I actually do fairly like this boss. If I was ranking this purely on my first run, then it would definitely be lower, but after my second and third runs, I found it to be a lot more enjoyable. This was mostly because I knew what I was doing, and on my first go, I was very lost and confused. It's probably one of FromSoft's weirdest designs with the egg sack crotch and all, but there are some cool, very cool visuals in the fight, and it's certainly a memorable experience, especially that Phase 2 transition where the floor comes crumbling down. It's another gimmick boss that has specific weak points that are the only things you can damage. Attacking anywhere else in the boss does nothing. It gave me a hard time on my first run because I didn't know where all the weak points were, and it can be a bit of a mess trying to find them all. It requires you to run around the whole boss, which at times can be a bit tedious. It can also stand up and spin around, which makes hitting certain weak spots difficult and can be frustrating at times. I definitely think the enemies in Phase 1 as well are really unnecessary, but once you get to Phase 2, it's much better. All in all, I enjoyed this a lot more on my second run, because I knew what I was doing, and it was really satisfying to beat it first try. Number 19 is Aldrich, Devourer of Gods. Honestly, I felt like Aldrich was just a glorified version of Crystal Sage. I don't think Crystal Sage is better by any means, but I didn't enjoy Aldrich as much on my second and third playthroughs, and I'm honestly putting him here purely out of spite, because this is my list, and if I'm pissed at a boss and want to rank it lower because of that, I can. He was pretty fun my first time, admittedly, and I think I didn't enjoy him as much on my second run, because I chose a much slower strength build with Vort's Great Hammer. The fact that the fight takes place in the same arena you fight Ornstein and Smo in is really cool, but I don't think this arena works as well for Aldrich. First of all, like Crystal Sage, he teleports around the arena, forcing you to chase him down quite often. Although the arena isn't very large, it's bigger than the Sage's, and it's a bit more annoying. Aldrich is constantly spitting projectiles, and once he breaks the pillars, it's just a game of outrunning them and finding whatever moments you can to get a few hits in. I will say that I was really clumsy in this fight. There were a lot of well-telegraphed attacks that I failed to dodge every time. So most of the frustration with this fight is my fault. That damn arrow barrage, though, that's some bullshit right there. The size of the arena may not be a huge deal for the teleporting aspect of the fight, but it certainly makes dodging the projectiles a bit more tedious. It can just be a chaotic mess at times, and for Lord of Cinder, he's honestly one of the weakest in my opinion. Not in terms of lore, but just as a fight. All the other lords feel so grand or important, whereas Aldrich just feels kind of lackluster. At least that's how I feel about it. I still think he's a cool fight, and he certainly gets points for memorability. Coming in at number 18 is Crystal Sage. This is another boss that's usually ranked lower, but there's something about this fight that I really liked. It's a fairly easy fight, especially on the second and third playthroughs, but like I said, I did rank Aldrich lower out of spite, so if I make another list, the Sage will probably be lower. If I really do take into account my initial first-time thoughts, I actually think this might be around where I'd put it. Phase 1 is really easy, and it lulls you into a false sense of security before Phase 2, when multiple Sages spawn in, and the projectiles are flying everywhere. They have a smaller arena than Aldrich, and although the projectiles are a bit more chaotic, you can kill the false sages in one hit, which makes things much better. The ability to mitigate how much shit is coming at you is really nice, and it was a lot of fun to figure out on my first run. I will say it's not the most memorable boss, and they do reuse it as an enemy in the Grand Archives, which makes it feel less unique. Overall, I don't think it's bad, and I had fun with it. Number 17 is Vort of the Boreal Valley. This is the second boss in the game, and it's so good. Vort is a great early game boss, but honestly, I kind of wish he was a late game boss, because he's so fun and such a cool fight, but it's criminally short and really easy. Basically, you just stick to his crotch the whole time, and then it's over. Phase 1 is really nothing crazy, but then Phase 2 kicks in, and you get this sense that he's going mad. He starts charging you back and forth, and breathing icy wind. He's frantic in a way, and it's like he knows he's losing and he's doing everything in his power to stop you. I'm ranking him so low only because once you know the fight, it's really easy, and the memorability of it only lasted through my first run. After that, he just became a simple obstacle. There's not much to add to it in later runs. It's just kind of the same thing every time. Other than that, I don't think there's anything else to say about this boss. Let's just move on. Wait. What's this? Did you really think I was going to talk about Vort and not mention his theme song? It's iconic. Absolutely fantastic. I would talk about it more, but I want to make a separate video for the boss music as well, so that's something to look forward to later. Now that that's said, we can move on for real. Number 16 is the Old Demon King. This to me is a perfect mid-boss. I like it enough to give it a middle-of-the-road ranking, but I don't like it enough to put it too high. The Old Demon King was actually a really fun fight my first time. He's an optional boss, and there's nothing crazy going on in this fight. Once you've learned it, it's really easy. I beat it first try on my second and third runs. I will say the lock-on in the fight is really weird. It doesn't always work right and can be very frustrating at times, but it's not that bad if you know when to lock on and off. One thing I really like about this fight is that final moment when the Demon King uses the last of his strength to create a huge AoE explosion. Now, after that moment, the fight's practically over, because he has nothing left and you can just finish his health bar without any trouble. But if you wait a moment, there's a really interesting and tragic scene that plays out, where we see the Demon King reaching out and trying to stop you with what little strength he has left. Even in his final moments, he still tries to keep going, and it's really powerful and interesting. I don't know, I like this fight, and this is where I put it based on my initial experience. Coming in at number 15 is Dancer of the Boreal Valley. And this marks a shift in the list, as now we're nearing some of the more high-tier bosses that I find particularly special. Now this is still fairly middle of the road, but we're getting ever closer. Dancer is just a good fight that, although I have my struggles with it, I can't deny that it is really fun. I had a good time with Dancer on my first run, but I beat it third try, and I didn't really get to learn the fight, so taking my time with it the second and third runs felt really good. It's just such an elegant boss, and it really is a carefully choreographed dance. I still haven't really nailed the moveset yet, so I can't say too much more about it, but I'll do my best to share some thoughts here and there. First off, that big spinning swing attack during Phase 2 is pretty nuts. It can almost feel endless at times, but if you learn the timing or are out of range, then it's not too scary. Some of her attacks can come out really fast, and I definitely struggled to recognize a lot of the windups for them. They start off slow and then come down real fast. There's a lot more I could say about this boss, but it's mostly in regards to the design and music. And those are topics for separate videos. I do really like this boss, but I'm ranking it here because I think I need more time with it. I have to learn the moveset a little bit more and get used to it. Surprisingly, number 14 is Champion's Gravetender. I actually surprised myself with this one. I never would have thought that after my first run, I'd rank this boss as high as I have now. In my original list, I had this boss in dead last, bottom of the list. I hated this fight initially, but after thinking about it some more and going in for round 2 and 3, I realized this is actually a pretty solid boss. Both times I fought this boss, I was under level, and this It was really what made the fight so hard the first time, but I'm actually glad I stuck with it and didn't come back too much later, because once I beat it that first time, it felt so good, and I was thrilled. My second playthrough for this video, I got it first try, and it really made me realize how much I'd learned from the first time, which was so cool. Although I do like this boss a good deal, I have my critiques. Firstly, Phase 1, kinda bullshit. A 4v1 with the Gravetender and 3 wolves will never not be annoying to me. Once you've dealt with the wolves, though, the one-on-one with the Gravetender is pretty fun. But then Phase 2 kicks in, and the Gravetender's Great Wolf descends from the sky. I don't know what it is with Miyazaki and wolves falling from the sky, but maybe he's onto something, because this is where the fight really shines. Once the Gravetender is actually dead, the one-on-one with the wolf is pretty fair and enjoyable. This boss really tested my patience and taught me a valuable lesson. Even though it was frustrating my first time, it felt worth it by the end, and it's really grown on me. The real lesson here is don't fight them underleveled. Or do, if you want more of a challenge, because it's pretty fun that way too. Number 13 is the Dragon Slayer armor. This is honestly kind of a low ranking for this boss, but I have my reasons for placing it here, and I'll explain. My first time fighting this boss, I beat it first try. I have no idea how I did it, but it was wild, and I actually laughed pretty hard, because I just kind of blacked out and blasted through it. I wasn't even using a strength build or anything. I just got really lucky. Or maybe I'm just that good. Afterwards, I was actually kind of sad because I didn't get to learn the fight and experience it to its full extent. So going in on later playthroughs, I actually wanted to take more time with it so I could really learn the moves and have a more well-rounded experience. Although I did take my more time with it and got to learn the moves better, I still beat it after 3 or 4 tries, but it still felt really good. I originally ranked it much lower because of how little experience I had with it, but after my second run and third run, I've pushed it up much higher, and if I make an updated list later on, I probably put it even higher. It's just a solid fight. The armor's moveset is really fun. The pilgrim butterflies on the sides can be a bit of a nuisance, but I really never paid them any mind, so it doesn't change my thoughts or affect the ranking in any way. I don't like that you can just fall off the arena either, but it only ever happened once to me, so that doesn't really matter much either. The only negative things I have to say about this boss are not even that big of a deal. It's just a good, fun, epic boss, and I really got nothing else to say about it. Coming in at number 12, we have Eudex and Champion Gundyr. I'm ranking both of them in the same spot because my thoughts are very similar for both, and I feel about the same way for both of them as well. Starting with Eudex, this may very well be the best possible boss to start off the game. He's got a great moveset that feels really good once you learn it. It really gauges your ability to time dodges and recognize hit windows. In Phase 2, he becomes this pus of man, and all of a sudden things switch up on you. It teaches you what to expect moving forward, and that is the unexpected. Now, Eudex is great, but Champion Gundyr is something else. If I did rank these bosses separately, I would definitely put Champion above Eudex, but they're just so close together that it didn't seem worth it to separate them. Phase 1 Champion Gundyr is very similar to Eudex, but he's more aggressive and has some additional moves. The fight really kicks it up in Phase 2, where he becomes much more aggressive and has a variety of new attacks. When I say aggressive, I mean he is relentless. The heal windows are very small, and it can be quite difficult to find a hit window without getting punished. I am by no means good at this fight, and on both my playthroughs, Phase 2 Champion Gundyr gave me a pretty hard time, but I still had fun with it and found it to be a rewarding and memorable experience at the end. On my second and third runs, I started to learn the parry timings a bit better, and that definitely takes time to learn, but it makes the fight a lot easier. It can take a bit to figure out which attacks you can parry, but once you know it and nail it down, it's really satisfying. Overall, it just feels good, and it's a pretty solid fight. If you can beat Eudex Gundyr, then you can beat DS3. And that's what really makes this a great first boss, with Champion Gundyr testing you midway through to prepare for the endgame bosses. Number 11 is Osiros the Consumed King. Osiros, or Osiris, in my opinion, is a fairly underrated boss. Do I think he's better than Gundyr, Dancer, or Dragon Slayer? No, not really, but I feel like even if I made an updated list, I'd still put him fairly high up in the mid-tier. There's a lot I can say about the design and music in this fight, but I'm focusing for this list on the boss itself and how enjoyable it was to fight. I have to say, I did have a lot of fun in this fight, and he's a really compelling character. As so many people have pointed out before, he's a very vocal boss and has an awful lot to say during the fight.
Dear little Ocelot, where have you gone? Are you hiding from me? Come out. Don't be afraid. You were born a child of dragons. What could you possibly fear? Now, show yourself, Ocelot. My dear little Ocelot.
The lore behind this boss is really cool, and although I'm not ranking the bosses based on lore, I have to give Osiris points for it because it's so interesting to me, and I really like how much they give you to work with. The story of Osiris and his crossbreed child Ocelot is just very intriguing to me. I don't remember the full story off the top of my head, but it has something to do with Osiris trying to gain the power of a true dragon, and Ocelot is the key to gaining such power or something. I'll have to watch the Vati video again to refresh my memory. I'll talk more about it in another video, but it's really cool, trust me. This definitely made the boss very memorable. I was really clumsy on my second run because of the slower build that I chose, but I enjoyed the fight just the same. It's not the most flashy or exciting boss in terms of mechanics, but it does just enough to be pretty solidly fun. At least to me. Number 10 is Yorm the Giant. This is an underrated boss. Yeah, sure, it's a gimmick boss. You can kill him in about 5 hits, but I love this boss so much. I am kind of ranking him based on design and music, but that's part of what made this fight so awesome for me, and it enhanced the experience to a point where I can't help but be influenced by it. In terms of mechanics, the gimmick is a weapon called the Storm Ruler, and it's basically a slower version of the Serpent Hunter from Elden Ring. It is really slow, but once you learn the fight, it's not that bad and you understand how to handle it. I attempted to beat it a few times without using the gimmick, but it just takes so long, and I don't have that much patience, though I would like to beat it at least once without using Storm Ruler. It's definitely possible, much more possible than beating Ancient Wyvern without the gimmick. I just really enjoyed this fight. It stood out to me my first time, and it was so fun to figure out the gimmick on my own. Oh, it was just great. Yorm is a great Lord of Cinder boss too, in my eyes. He really brings this feeling of power and grandeur to the fight. His moveset was pretty easy to learn, and it felt satisfying once I got it. Even though the gimmick can make it a fairly short fight, I found it to be one of my favorite gimmick bosses, and even if I make a new list later on, I think he'd still make it pretty high up on there. I also just think the weight of everything, the music has weight to it, the boss itself has weight to it, his attacks, like, he really feels like a giant. This to me is just an awesome giant fight. Number 9 is Pontiff Sullivan. Alright, now it's time for the high tier bosses. First playthrough, he was kind of a wall, and I was almost stumped on how to beat him. He was really intimidating, and his attacks seemed so fast that I couldn't gauge when to dodge and when to heal. When I eventually did beat him, it was a complete blur as I entered a zone where the world around me faded, and it was just me and the Pontiff going at it. I couldn't tell you much from that experience other than the thrill of having beaten him. Second time, however, I was focused on learning his moveset and getting the timing right. Although I didn't quite execute it as planned, it was still just as fun to fight, even if I struggled at times. By the third time, I definitely recognized more of his moves and learned some tricks to dodging a lot of attacks. This boss is meant to be a wall. It's a big jump in difficulty that prepares you for the late game early on. Something I learned was to stick close to him and hope to just naturally avoid some attacks without even having to dodge. This works for the most part, but it's very positional and specific. This fight has more than just the fun of a challenge, though. It's got spectacle value. The arena is huge, and the gorgeous windows at the back of the church are just so perfect, and the soundtrack accompanies it all beautifully. I'm not even influenced by this in the ranking. I just have to mention it because it's so good. He does have some big combos that are kind of scary, and I often heal too eagerly before letting the combo finish, so that definitely is something I need to work on. I do it with more than just this boss, but it's definitely a pretty crucial thing in this fight. Even with all the struggle I've had with this boss, I still enjoy it every time, and I think it's a pretty solid high-tier boss. Number 8 is Demon Prince. This is the first boss of the Ring City DLC, and let me just say, what a way to start things off. This boss has got a lot going for it. It's got great music, a sick design, and a pretty solid moveset. The fight starts with you falling down a giant pit to then be faced by the demon in pain and the demon from below. This already is a very memorable moment, and it only gets better. The duo fight is pretty fair for the most part, but it gave me a tough time on my second run due to the slower strength build I chose, and the fact that I was way more underleveled than my first run. Overall, I think it's fairly well done, though it can be a bit overwhelming when the two demons are attacking at once, but in my third run I learned how to handle it better, and it wasn't too bad. I don't really have much else to say about this phase, so let's talk about phase 2, where the demon in pain, who has more health and is usually the last to be killed of the two, gets back up and becomes the demon prince. I mean, this is just a sick phase transition. Look at this. Not only are the visuals awesome, but the music is just so fitting and so powerful in this moment. I absolutely love it. Demon Prince takes the moveset of the first two demons and sets it all on fire. It's definitely a tough fight, but it's a great way to tell if you're prepared for the rest of the DLC or not. I thoroughly enjoyed Demon Prince my first playthrough, but my second run gave me a much harder time, but it was really exciting when I finally beat it. Third run, I did it first try, and that was really something. Made me feel like I had really learned from previous mistakes, which is a great lesson that all the Soulsborne games teach. Even with all the struggles I had at times, it's just a damn good fight, and I always look forward to it. It's not about how easy or hard the boss is, it's about how much fun you had fighting it, and how it feels to beat it. Or how good it feels to beat it. At least that's what I base my thoughts on. It's all in good fun. And that's what this boss is to me. Just good fun. Coming in at number 7 is Dark Eater Midir. Dark Eater Midir is, in my opinion, the best dragon fight FromSoft has produced. It's also one of my favorite dragon designs of all time. This fight is hard, and it takes a while to finally beat, even if you know the moveset. It's just a long fight, the health pool is massive. Initially, I was pretty frustrated with this boss, and I'll admit, I have moments even now where he feels kind of bullshit. But once you're in the zone, it just feels like a beautiful dance with a dragon. The moves are well telegraphed, and a key thing that I learned is to not lock on, because that messed me up bad my first run, and I probably could have saved a lot of time if I didn't lock on so much. Midir's moveset is somewhat limited, as he only has a handful of attacks, and Phase 2 doesn't do much to add anything new. There are a few new moves, but for the most part it's the same set, just with some minor changes. My latest playthrough, I beat him first try, which was shocking, but it really proved to me not only that I'd learned the fight, but that once you know it, it's just a matter of following the patterns. Let's talk about Phase 2 for a moment. That phase transition is so awesome. I love it. When he spreads his enormous, tattered wings and explodes with dark energy. Even if you don't like the fight itself, there's no denying that this is just so insanely cool. I love so much about this boss, but I have my grievances as well. When it comes down to it, there's a balance of things that feel fair and unfair in every fight. And as long as the unfair doesn't outweigh or overshadow the fair, I'd say that's a damn good boss. I don't know, that's just me. Even with the enormous health pool, the limited moveset, and janky lock-on, this fight still manages to be one of my favorites, as the thrill of beating it is unforgettable. Number 6 is Soul of Cinder. The final boss of the game, of the base game, is one for the books. This fight has it all. Action, adrenaline, anger, sorrow, and on top of all of that, a sick design and incredible soundtrack. Soul of Cinder is a culmination of all three games that embodies the struggles and strengths of past players and characters in the lore. I have to say, although I love this fight and I've put it pretty high, I suck at it. I am legitimately bad at this boss, and I know it. I can confidently dodge some moves, but far too often I find myself panic rolling away from others. Even with all this, I still manage to have a great deal of fun with it, and as I slowly learn the moves each run, it only gets better and better. It's definitely not the greatest boss ever. It's a pretty fair duel though, and it does some really cool things to keep you on your toes every time. Because Soul of Cinder is meant to be a conglomeration of souls who linked the fire previously, it has 5 different movesets, which definitely makes it harder to memorize, but These movesets aren't too complicated once you know them. The opening sword set and the holy spear set are the easiest ones for me to handle. The sorcerer moveset is alright, but I slip up quite often. It's that curved sword moveset that gets me every time. I'm just so shitty at dodging the attacks. They come out really fast and often stack up on each other. There's also a random poison breath move that to me just comes out of nowhere, but okay, I guess. I like the backflips that he does. It's kind of funny to me for some reason. Phase 1 is a lot, but that's just the opener for something even greater. This may very well be one of my favorite boss transitions in gaming. The music swells, and the boss gets down on its knees, seemingly weakened. But then it stands back up, and he plunges the coiled sword into the ground, which erupts with flames, as the music crescendos and morphs into that oh so beautiful pling plong pling, bringing a nostalgic tear to the eye as we remember the Lord of Cinder, Gwyn. And then you get absolutely roasted by that one move that can't be dodged through or broken out of. It's just incredible, and I absolutely love every second of that transformation. Phase 2 is a bit more manageable for me, as the boss stops switching attack styles, but it's still quite a challenge and immensely rewarding at the end. I just think this is such a great final boss, a beautiful end to a beautiful series. Until, of course, the DLCs that brought an even better ending, but we'll get to them when it's their time. For number 5, I've put Lorien and Lothric. The Twin Princes are an interesting case. Some people absolutely love them, others can't stand them. I, for one, adore this fight, and I look forward to it every time I start a new game. I feel like this boss's attacks are some of the most satisfying to dodge. It just feels so clean and smooth, if you get it right. I don't know why those are the words I chose to describe the moveset with, but that's how it feels. The one-on-one with Lorien is clean, and I really enjoy this phase. I think the biggest complaint about them is that they teleport around the arena and can appear out of nowhere, which can be frustrating and disorienting for some, and that's pretty valid. Honestly, I think that if they didn't teleport, the fight would be way too easy. The moves are so precise and well telegraphed that without the teleporting, it would just be way too easy. You could literally just shut down and zone out. There'd be less of a need to pay attention to it. At least that's what I think. There is that one teleporting attack that unlocks you from him and causes you to frantically look around the arena to try to find him before he slams his sword onto the floor and destroys you with that holy light path or whatever it's called. I've definitely experienced a fair amount of frustration from that move, but it wasn't enough to detract from the rest of the fight. I think the other thing that sours people on this fight is the walk back, which at first seems insane as it's littered with enemies that are a downright pain to deal with. It wasn't until my second run that I realized there is a much safer run back from the Dragonslayer armor bonfire. It may not be as direct, but it's so much better as you can avoid running past all those enemies every single time. You only have to do it once, and then you're set. Phase 2, when Lothric comes down and climbs on his brother's back to resurrect him, it's so great. This phase takes Phase 1 and adds holy projectiles and a bit more aggression, and I absolutely love this phase. And towards the end, the adrenaline really starts pumping, and it's so thrilling and exciting. Also, what a soundtrack on this boss. One of my favorites. This is just a fantastic boss, in my opinion. and quite frankly, there's so much more I could say. Like, that's the end of the script that I wrote. I could go on for even longer talking about this boss. I love it. And as of writing the script for this video, I actually was only on like 3 playthroughs, but as of recording this voiceover, I'm on my 4th playthrough. And let me tell you, that 4th playthrough, I beat Lorien and Lothric first try, and it felt so good. It was just like, oh my god, once you really know this fight, it's so clean. Like, my first 3 playthroughs, well, actually, no, that's a lie. 3rd playthrough, I beat him, like, 2nd try or something. But the first 2 playthroughs, Lorien and Lothric was one of the hardest. And it was really just because I was being clumsy, and I still was learning the moveset. So it really goes to show that the more time you end up spending in a boss. Like, I can definitely say that the bosses that gave me a really hard time, my first and second playthroughs, by now I have learned a lot more. I'm not a pro, but I can definitely go into these fights with a little more confidence. Uh, all those failures from before, I have just, you learn so much. Like, these bosses that at first end up being really hard, like, they have a solid moveset. It's just a matter of figuring out, okay, when is a safe time to heal, when is a safe time to attack, and figuring out those windows. It's so good once you know it. I love this boss. It's an amazing boss. Sorry, I just had to go off on that one. Coming in at number 4 is the Nameless King. Previously considered one of the hardest bosses in the series, I think by now most people have learned Nameless King pretty well, and it's definitely not nearly as hard for most people anymore, unless you're brand new to the game. I, for one, didn't think it was too hard at first, but it's absolutely one of the hardest bosses in the game, and it is a solid challenge. But I wouldn't say it's insanely difficult. I'm just bad at dodging sometimes. The fight starts with the King of the Storm, and this phase initially was really annoying for me, because of the kind of the same problem I had with Midir, which was locking on. This fight is so much easier if you just don't lock on. The only time I do is during the flying lightning bolt move. Once I figured this out, it was so much easier. When locking on, I was unable to see anything that was coming at me, and when I should dodge to avoid an attack. I ended up struggling on this phase for longer than I'd like to admit, but hey, the game is about learning from mistakes, and here I am now, knowing better. At first I couldn't understand why this fight was so highly praised, but now I get it, and I'm right on board. And the fight isn't really praised because of the King of the Storm, that first phase, but I do really enjoy it. It's really the next phase that defines this whole experience. The Nameless King is such a good fight, it's not even funny. I love this fight, and like Lorien and Lothric, it's so satisfying to get a perfect dodge or a big hit. I don't really know what else to say besides, I love this fight. Great boss, big dragon, cool hair, and Gwyn's son? Yeah, I definitely have to talk more about this boss, about all the bosses. But for now, this ranking, I think that's all I have to say about this boss. There's so much more to get into about the music, the lore, the design. Like I said before, I'm going to make videos, separate videos for these topics, because I love this game so much and I love all the bosses. But yeah, anyways, let's keep it moving. We're almost there. Number 3 are the Abyss Watchers. This may come as a surprise, as this is a very early game boss, and it's the first Lord of Cinder you encounter. The fact that I'm ranking it so highly may seem odd. I mean, it's a great boss, but is it great enough to earn 3rd place? In my opinion, yes. Absolutely. This was the first huge wall I faced on my first playthrough, and I stepped away for a while when I got to this boss before getting back to it and absolutely loving it. For me, this boss helped define what Dark Souls was all about. I was so used to the faster pace of Elden Ring that it took me a while to really adjust to Dark Souls, and as it felt like a slower and more tedious process. Abyss Watchers really tested me and taught me what the game was about. I had to really step back and focus, be patient, be mindful of my surroundings. I had to really learn the boss better than any other I had before. When I finally got it, it was probably the most exciting moment I've ever had while gaming. The flow of this fight is just so beautiful, and the story that it tells is incredible. Also beautiful. The music it's one of my favorite songs of all time, and it just captures everything about this fight so beautifully. It tells such a tragic tale. There's there's this pain, there's this marching forward. I mean, I'll talk about the music in another video. I've said this so many times, but it's so beautiful. It can be scary in Phase 1 to have to deal with 2 Watchers at once, and then the 3rd one pops up, but it's fine. He's chill. Well, sort of. But if Phase 1 wasn't exhilarating enough, then it really gets good in Phase 2. This is also one of my favorite boss transitions, and it's just such a moving moment. I definitely have to talk more about this in another video. The whole thing is just incredible, and I'm ranking it so highly, mostly because of its personal meaning to me, and less so the mechanics or the design, which are amazing as well. The moment I beat Abyss Watchers is the moment when Dark Souls made sense to me, and that was really something special. I mean, that just says a whole lot about this boss, the teaching moment that it gave me. It's just an amazing fight, start to finish. Number 2 is Sister Frida and Father Ariandel. Sister Frida has been called the hardest boss in Dark Souls so many times. She's even been called the hardest boss of any Souls game, until Malenia, of course. Personally, I think Frida is harder, but that's a debate for another time. I actually think Frida is very similar to Malenia in a number of ways. The biggest being that they're both barefoot women. No. In all seriousness, they both stagger really easily, and you can pretty much stun lock them if you have the right gear. Phase 1 Frida is fairly challenging at first, but now that I know the moveset, it's actually pretty easy. Sometimes. I really enjoy this phase, but many people say that she's too fast for Dark Souls 3's slower, more methodical gameplay. But I actually think it's fine. In fact, if she were any slower, I don't think the fight would be nearly as notable, or as hard. Phase 1 is beautiful, but then you get that Phase 2 transition and it turns into something even bigger. Father Ariandel lets out this painful cry, this scream that is bone-chilling. There's so much tragedy and emotion in that moment. You really feel like he's really mourning the loss of Frida. Of course, then she gets back up and the fight continues, but it's still a powerful moment. The fight with Frida and Father Ariandel is not the greatest, but I still like it. If you focus on Ariandel, it's fairly easy, as long as you remember to avoid Frida's ice attacks. After this, you feel a sense of relief, and it's utterly thrilling. But then, what do you know? Frida gets back up and goes absolutely crazy. Black Flame Frida is an absolute blast of adrenaline and energy. The music is going nuts, Frida's absolutely nuts, jumping into the air, throwing ice and black flame, and choking me with her sides. This boss is a marathon to get through, but it is easily one of my favorite bosses of all time, and I absolutely love it. I'm fumbling over my words. I love this boss so much. And finally, in number 1, we have Slave Knight Gale. Alright, I know, very original of me to put Gale as my favorite boss in Dark Souls 3. But can you blame me? I mean, look at this. It's just a masterpiece of a boss. The fight itself is incredible. The design is so cool, and the music? Oh yeah, this is my favorite song of all time, no question. The energy that this song exudes is incredible. It really takes you on a journey through the fight and tells you the story so beautifully. I don't even have to see the visuals or know the story or lore to understand what this song is trying to convey. This is outright my favorite boss in any game I've ever played or seen. I love it. I could make an entire video just on this one boss. There's so much to say. I don't think much of what I'm saying now is new, but I just have to express how fucking incredible this boss is. Gale was absolutely the hardest boss for me. I died more to Gale than any other boss in Dark Souls or Elden Ring. Now, having said that, why would I then put it at the very top of the list if it was so hard, if I had to spend so much time on it? Well, like I said earlier, it's not just about how hard a fight is, it's about how much fun you have while fighting it and how it feels to beat it at the end. And I had fun every single time I went into this fight. I died so much my first time that eventually I was able to get through Phase 1 hitless, which was pretty crazy for me because, like I've said, I'm not the best at dodging and I often let my impatience get the better of me. This fight, like Abyss Watchers, Frida, and Nameless King, taught me how the game works, and Gale was a perfect culmination of everything I'd learned. The ultimate test of patience and determination for the game. It's a long fight, just like Frida and Midir, but it's so worth it in the end. This is just the perfect boss, I think, to end off the Dark Souls series and bring the story to a close. Those final moments with the painter back in the painted world after beating Gale had me tearing up. It was such a beautiful ending, and even though there's no cutscene or outro like the base game, I think it was more impactful just leaving things open. It really just leaves you thinking, wow, that's it. Where do we go from here now? I don't know why that hit me so hard, but it did, and I absolutely love it. I I can't express how much I love this boss. I know I'm just going like I love this boss, but I really do. I don't really know how I could go into detail about what about this fight is so great. I mean, it, like I said, it takes pretty much everything you learn from the base game and brings it all together in one epic fight. The moves are really great. It presents some new challenges, but it brings back old ones, and it feels great to dodge. Like, I love dodging his moves, and the 3-phase marathon that this fight goes through is incredible. Um, it's just amazing. I mean, I'm not, like I said, this is not a detail at the very beginning. I said this. This is not a detailed breakdown of mechanics or lore, so I'm not going to get into all of that. There's plenty of other people who've gone over all the details of why this fight is so just incredible, why this is an absolute masterpiece. But all so so all I'm really going to say is that I'm right on board. I love this boss, and I really do think that this is my favorite boss of all time. I don't think there will be any game that has a boss that I love as much as this boss. In fact, I don't think there's another game out there that I will find that I will love more than Dark Souls 3. It's just incredible. It's so incredible. Sorry. I'm just saying the same things. I'm repeating myself. Alright, I gotta stop gushing over this boss. Let's wrap this video up. Wow. Well, that was a lot. But I'm really happy I made this video. And I can't wait to talk more about this game and the rest of the series. I'm definitely gonna do some other stuff before I do anything else Souls related, because this video took so long, and I have a lot of other videos that I'd like to do before I do any other Souls videos, you know. This literally took like months. I put a lot of time into this. If you made it to the end of this and watched the whole thing all the way through, I really appreciate that, because I put a lot of time and effort into this. Even though it's a just for fun project, I really want to make decent, or at least interesting, content, because I have the time to make these videos decent, or at least half decent, I should hope. I've said this so many times, but I'm just doing the best I can with what I've got, and I'm trying to make my content a little better moving forward, because I like making this stuff. It's just another fun, creative outlet to have. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, then maybe consider sticking around, because I will definitely be making more Souls stuff. Just not right away. I've got a lot of things in the works, and I'm just excited to keep making fun stuff and having a good time. And you know, I want to do some more fun, silly stuff, but I also want to do some more, you know, professional, serious stuff. I want to really get into the nature videos and maybe do some goofy movie reviews or something like that. But yeah, you know, I go on, I say this at the end of like every video. I say the same things. Let me just shut up. Just